Welcome to today's time capsule. We're going back to 1998. The BCS has first teams. Tennessee and Florida State were the 1 and 2 teams in the country that year. Tennessee ended up 13-0 and 8-0 in the SEC. They did win a national championship by defeating Florida State in the Fiesta Bowl. They defeated Syracuse, who were ranked number 17th at the time, 34-33, and that is an interesting game. We'll get to that. They beat Florida 20-17 in overtime. They beat number 10 Arkansas 28-24. Another interesting twist in that game. In the SEC championship game, another twist in that game. You could say that this was a rebuilding team for Tennessee. Their championship year should have been the year before, when they lost to Nebraska 42-16 or something. They got blown out, and that was Peyton Manning with the team at that time. The key players: T. Martin, Peerless Price, Travis Henry, and linebacker Al Wilson. Tennessee led the SEC in rushing at 211.3 yards and turnover margin plus 1.33 per game. This may have been the luckiest team ever, and we're going to talk about why today in our time capsule as we go back in time. Today it's 1998, and the team is Tennessee. They may have been the luckiest champion ever. Now, before you say I'm knocking Tennessee by saying it was the luckiest champion ever, when you finished watching this video, you'll have to agree that this team had quite a few breaks. It was a good football team. It really was. But good football teams don't always go 13-0 and win a national title. And we're going to start really right off the bat. The wackiness began on the opening game in Syracuse, and we're going to talk about that one. Well, UT's offense had to be rebuilt following the 1997 season. The entire philosophy of the offense that had thrived for 3+ years under Peyton Manning had to be reworked. Manning was gone, as was the tendency for coaches to throw the ball more aggressively with him at the helm. Now, the Vols had to morph into something different on offense. I don't think there's any question. David Cutcliffe was quoted as saying during a recent interview to discuss a magical run to the national championship. Cutcliffe said one of the things that became apparent, they had to be more physical. The 1998 team could run power, and defined that starting in the spring. The defense becoming maybe the best defense in the country because we went right at them. They beat us, and they beat each other up badly. So that spring, Cutcliffe was starting to wonder if they'd even make a first down, but they didn't back off. T. Martin was tabbed to replace Manning in 1998, and Martin admitted that he lacked the consistency his coaches were looking for in spring practice. It couldn't have been a fun time. So as you can see, a championship team sometimes is actually born or is formulated in the off season. The things that can happen and can get a team to play it together. There were some key moments in the season that changed the landscape of this 1998 season for Tennessee. Most people familiar with that season, they go back to key moments. Tennessee in the SEC championship game was on the ropes in Atlanta. The Vols trailed Mississippi State 14-10 before Martin threw 2 touchdown passes in 32 seconds in the fourth quarter. First was a 41 strike to Price, and the second was a 26-yard pass to Wilson after the state fumble. Thanks to losses by the nation's other 2 undefeated teams, UCLA and Kansas State, the Vols were assured a chance to win a national title. They made the BCS, the first time they had a real playoff. And Tennessee got a break there just to get in that game. They were undefeated, but they had to have the help of 2 other undefeated teams late in the year to stay undefeated and be one of the 2 undefeated teams. Again, that's a little bit of luck. The next thing that people familiar with this season, the interception. The interception, as simple as that. Dwayne Goodrich helped set the tone with a 54-yard interception return for a touchdown against Florida State in that Fiesta Bowl, which was the site of the national championship game. The score put the Vols up 14-0 and let their defense rule the day. Florida State was hampered by having to play backup quarterback Marcus Outson, who struggled throughout the day. T. Martin, the Peerless, Part 1 and 2. Price overshadowed Florida State star receiver Peter Warrick in the Fiesta Bowl. Price caught a pass for 76 yards that set up the Vols' first touchdown. Martin found Price again for a 79-yard touchdown pass that put the Vols up 20-9. Price ended up with 199 receiving yards, and the Vols won the national title with a 23-16 win over the Seminoles and finished the season undefeated. Well, that's the happy cupcake at the end. But we have to go back to the things that happened during the season that can only be described as fortunate, lucky, call it what you will. And I mentioned the Syracuse game, and it began right there. The Syracuse game itself was just a miracle that they actually won that game. Opening day in 1998 for Tennessee as they went to the Carrier Dome in Syracuse, New York, and faced Paul Pasqualoni's team, who had not won an opening day in 4 years. Bill Fulmer had something to prove as well. He had to prove to the football world that he was more than Peyton Manning, who was no longer with the team. This Tennessee team was reinvented. It featured more rushing and more power, and the quarterback play was more support. However, T. Martin was the heart of this football team. Jamal Lewis, the powerful running back, was a nice counterpunch. And Tennessee could hurt you in any sort of direction, any kind of way, on any play. And this game started off back and forth, a hard-hitting football team. Both teams have been priming for this game all summer. And it did appear that Syracuse may have been a little bit better shape. And so it came down to a fourth quarter game. And both teams were still hitting hard. As we pick it up, pretty much the game was decided in the last 5 minutes of play, as both teams had an opportunity to win the football game. And it did look like both teams were going to win the football game at one point in the last 5 minutes of that fourth quarter. So we'll pick it up there. It was a wonderful football game, and Donovan McNabb had 300 yards passing. A good day passing for him. There were 5 fumbles from McNabb. 3 of them were recovered, and fumbles played a part on both teams, as we'll get to that. It came down to, with 5 minutes to play, Tennessee should have had the game in their hand. They were led by 1 point, but were moving the football, and it had that look of a drive that was going to take the lead, and had they got a nice touchdown, they could have put the game away. However, on an extended play, T. Martin decides to run, gets some yardage, but the ball is knocked loose. He wasn't protecting the ball very well, and that gave Syracuse the football, down by a point, and that changed the direction of the game because Donovan McNabb, after a couple of runs, slung it downfield and got Syracuse down inside the 20, down to around the 10. Then the ferocious defense by Tennessee kept that from being a touchdown. However, Syracuse did get the lead. With 2:48 to play, Tennessee had the football back, now trailing in the game 33-31. They had 2 minutes and 48 seconds to save themselves, and their first, after a kind of a bad return, he tried to pick it up, badly played in my opinion, but he didn't get much on the return. They started off on the 20, and then Tennessee couldn't get anything going, and it got to 4th down and 7, and that was Tennessee's last shot. They were down by 2 points. The game is winding away, a minute 44 to play, and they're down to their last shot. And T. Martin throws, it's complete as they play, but there was a flag. It looked like it was incomplete. But there was a flag on the play, and when we look at that play, it was really touchy as to whether that really was a pass interference play. But it was called, and pass interference was called, and that gave Tennessee a second chance. And then the apparently disheartened Syracuse Orangemen were pushed around and slugged downfield. Tennessee managed to get a field goal in the last 3 seconds, and they won the football game. But that penalty, whether it was legit or not, was what saved the team from dropping their first game. And had they dropped that first game, it's almost certain they would not have been a national champion. The first year of the BCS, and everything matters, and you're playing a team like Syracuse, might have been forgiven, but there were 4 undefeated teams in the last week of the season. Two of those lost, which gave Tennessee the invitation because they were one of 2 undefeated teams, and that was the reason that they actually even played in the BCS game. And then they beat Florida State, and there was some miracles in that game too. So a very fortunate Tennessee team, but a good defensive team and a hard-hitting football team that has weapons like Jamal Lewis and T. Martin and all the other guys they had. Always has a puncher's chance, and sometimes what looks like luck is just toughness that shows up at the end, and you win the game. But it was a great win for Tennessee and Syracuse, and it did allow their perfect season to happen. And if it hadn't have, it would have been a completely different history. Thanks for joining us on Time Capsule. We go back in time and we look at what happened, and we maybe wonder what might have been.